Hello. How many of you out there have been in a situation, not unlike this one, where you sat in an audience, a classroom, a gymnasium, a church, and have had a speaker open with a story? And maybe that story has contained some humor. And perhaps that speaker has made a humorous story and brought what they thought was humor from their own experience, and they are trying to bring their own culture, their own life into that presentation. Sometimes that works really well, and you can tell that they are bringing them into that speech. And sometimes it's awkward, and you can tell that they have read that somewhere. They've opened a book, and it's not really their own speech, that they've brought that from somewhere else. I myself have seen that. Humor is a great tool. It's a great way to bring people together. It's a great way to break the ice, to put people at ease, because in situations such as meetings, workshops, even in church, when not everybody is at ease, first thing on a Sunday morning, kids are crying and people are a little bit tired and not quite awake yet. It's a great way to get everybody awake, everybody relaxed. But if you don't use the right type of humor, it makes everybody awkward and just does the complete opposite, has the opposite effect that that speaker was going for. So it's important to know what type of humor is good for everyone. Everyone out there that I'm talking to right now has their own favorite type of humor. And if you're like me, you need humor in your life just to get through it. I am a huge fan of comedy and of humor. You may not know it from listening to me because I have this monotone voice, but I spend a lot of my time, much of my day, listening to comedy, listening to humor. And if you ask most people that I know, they will tell you that I draw humor from life and I give humor back. So a lot of what I do and what I say and the conversations that I have with people, they're very lighthearted, and I try to draw good things from life and try to weed out the seriousness of life. So my message today is that humor can help us in all our facets of life. And that's what I want to talk to you about. I briefly touched on the benefits that people can bring into speeches, sermons, different things in gatherings, such as a speech. Unlike what we're doing here today online, but a large presentation in front of a large audience. Now, it would be a little bit different for stand up comedy, which is what I'm a big fan of. When we do stand up comedy, we are all in the same group. Everybody's at a different culture. We're all gathered together, and everyone's at a different place. And so laughter is like the center of it, and laughter is fully acceptable. Laughter is not acceptable in a meeting. That's why you don't want to use the same type of humor in a meeting as you would, say, at a comedy venue. So we don't tell jokes when we're doing a seminar or having a meeting. We can still inject humor, but we're not doing slapstick comedy. There was an opening. I work in a school district, and a few years ago, every year we have at the beginning of the year we have a large assembly where the entire school district meets first day of our school year, even before the students come, and our superintendent speaks. That superintendent of that year decided to bring a rubber chicken, and he had some message. and it all pertained, it all came together with this silly rubber chicken that he was holding. I don't even remember what the joke was, but it didn't get much of a laugh, and he could have done better, especially with 600 people sitting in an auditorium. So he bombed, and we got through it. The next year, he brought the chicken back. Not a good idea, terrible idea, and not very creative. And it said a lot about his character. And we were glad to see him leave because we've had an excellent superintendent since him. But again, it said terrible things about his leadership skills because he had no creativity. So that's a lot to say about what you can do with humor. Um, Creativity is a huge thing. So ironically, um, when I think of humor, I think of my dad. Um, I go back to my roots of humor. My dad was a real corny guy. He used humor from his era. My dad was a depression baby, and so the humor of that era was was very old fashioned, iconic, and he got a lot of it from the comic books, comic strips. So a lot of it you wouldn't really understand, especially a lot of people I'm talking to today. Um, Unfortunately, his siblings, of which he had 16, all use the same humor too. So it was inevitable that me and my siblings picked it up as well, much to my children's chagrin. And so, as much as we hated it, we ended up using it too. So we kind of bounced that off of one another, and we variated on that humor, pushed away what we really didn't like, and kind of kept what worked for us. So Dad was a funny guy, and we used that humor a little bit and kind of grimaced at the things he would say over and over and over again. But Dad was a funny guy, and we loved him and sure miss him. But there were sitcoms that came and went in the 60s and 70s that I was a big fan of, and we would watch with my dad, and I still watch them on reruns. And um, so a lot of that is kind of the root of my humor, and that I'm a big fan of comedy. And a lot of those things still kind of at the root of what I find lighthearted and make me happy and smile. My kids still make fun of me because I watch so much Seinfeld and all the other ones on a loop. Big fan of The Office, and I could just recite line for line all the Office episodes. Um, but I go back to the very old pioneers of comedy. Uh, you talk about the ones that go right from radio to TV. Um, and those those iconic comedians, the ones that told the stories. We're talking about like Will Rogers, who told the stories. They traveled from town to town and state to state all over the countryside, telling stories of politicians, and they were the original politician, bashers. We still do it today. All the comedians make fun of the politicians, and they do it in a big way. And Will Rogers was the guy that did that way back when, and he was the pioneer of that. And we have James Whitmore, who epitomized and kind of did a Will Rogers impression, followed him up, traveled the countryside doing that, and then we had Hal Holbrook doing the impression of let's see, who did he do? Um, he did Ralph Waldo Emerson, who was also a satirist. They did satire. So he and Whitmore both did satire, which was a form of comedy back then. It was a pioneer form of comedy. So both of those were satire. And back then, that was a very uh, cutting edge type of comedy. It was written, and they traveled from town to town um, performing that, and those guys were well revered. Um, so growing up watching comedy, we had our Carol Burnett shows and the Andy Griffith, of course, the Tonight Show. Way back then, it was Johnny Carson, and he had all the big top comedians on then. And now, it's Jimmy Fallon, but back then it was Johnny Carson, and then it was Jay Leno. But it's always been the greats of comedy, and they've made their start on those big variety shows. And again, that's how comedy started for a lot of them, and that's where I got my found my love for comedy. Uh, the Huffington Post, actually, when I was looking at some different things, they actually found some actual health benefits for laughter. A gal named Kayla Matthews, she was a blogger for the Huffington Post, and on January 12th, 2015, she listed some 6 powerful health benefits of laughter, which were actually clinically kind of proven. They did some research, and they found that it relieves stress, which I think we can all agree on. It relieves pain. They actually found that some pain sensors and that over time were activated. It boosts the immune system. It helps reduce blood pressure. It stimulates the mind, of course. We can all agree on that. And it's actually a good workout, they said. They said that 15 minutes of laughter can burn 50 calories, which equals one Chips Ahoy cookie. So there you go. I think that uh, we can all agree that we could use some laughter in our lives. I think with the comedians out there, we have our ones to choose from. There are so many out there. Maybe you have your favorites. There are all different genres. There are some that are out there that I really don't care for because they have different genres and they're a little bit crude. But there are a couple that I can listen to on loop. And they're newer ones, and I just love them. And I listen to them. We download them and listen to them in the car, and I just can't get enough of them. Um, Now, if you'll recall, if some of you are old enough, they do. If I go back to health benefits and things like that, there are still some out there touring, and they are entertaining the troops overseas. And we still have US, the USO, which is a organization that entertains the troops and does things for the armed forces. And ever since World War II, we've had comedians and entertainers traveling overseas. Bob Hope, if you're familiar with him, he would take a troupe of entertainers overseas, and they would entertain the troops just to loosen their load of stress, and they're still doing it today. So going back to relieving stress, right there is proof of that. So that's why we all need a little bit of laughter, a little bit of lightheartedness, and a little bit of humor in our lives. And it's been around for a long time, around as long as people have been communicating. It can make the communication process easier. That's why people open with a joke at church, at the meetings, at the seminars. It can work to our advantage. People at work tell jokes to lighten the mood and lighten the load. It makes this situation a little easier to tolerate. I've had some tough times in my life, and if it weren't for humor, if it weren't for my general outlook on life, um, things would have been a lot different for me. So our job as a society is to gauge our humor and try to strike a balance in our lives. And so I try to do that every day. So I hope I've left you with something new to consider and perhaps a little different view on the importance of humor and laughter in our lives. And I wish you well, and I wish you humor. Have a good day.